Good afternoon. My name's Andrew Thompson, and I'm the Executive Chair of the Arts and Humanities Research Council. I'm delighted to welcome you to this second Boundless Creativity event following our launch in May. Things have changed significantly since then as the country moves cautiously out of lockdown and the UK's arts, cultural and creative sector continues to tackle the challenges that lie ahead. The week began with some positive and much welcome news with Oliver Dowden's announcement of the £1.5 billion emergency rescue package. There are still many questions to answer though. What's the best way to reopen theatres and concert halls and to return to live performance? How can digital and immersive technologies help to build new audiences and to diversify them? And more fundamentally, why have so many of us turned to culture during this crisis? And why has culture proved so important for our lives as well as our livelihoods? This is where research in the arts and humanities can play a central role. There are several things that we at the Arts and Humanities Research Council are exploring, such as understanding the real-time, differentiated and disrupted impact of COVID-19 across the UK's cultural and creative sectors, and analysing how the cultural world has embraced digital technologies to overcome the twin challenges of telling global stories to global audiences while delivering the intimacy and authenticity of culture beamed into our homes. We've got a fantastic amount to get through. You'll hear an update on research commissioned during and in response to the pandemic, along with interventions from top cultural figures, Lem Sisse, Nicola Benedetti, Lu Zhang, and the Secretary of the Smithsonian Museums, Lonnie Bunch, and ending with a roundtable discussion involving some of the UK's cultural leaders. Shortly, we'll be welcoming the Science Minister, Amanda Solloway, and the newly instated Commissioner for Cultural Recovery and Renewal, Neil Mendoza. Neil and I have a special announcement today. We're launching a joint research project between the Department of Culture, Media and Sport and the Arts and Humanities Research Council. The project, co-chaired by Neil and myself, will be guided by an expert advisory panel to be announced later in the month. The aim is to enhance our understanding of the impact of the pandemic on culture and creativity, to look at the role of digital innovation in the cultural sector's recovery and renewal. You'll be getting tasters in the next hour of some of the hot off the press findings that are already beginning to emerge from the rich pickings of boundless creativity research activity. There'll be two opportunities for the media to ask questions that I'll chair, first in our discussion with the Science Minister and Neil Mendoza, and second in the roundtable panel. If journalists could please use the Vimeo Q&A function to submit questions, and please make sure to include your name and outlet. And now I'd like to introduce the first of our ambassador videos from Nicola Benedetti.
So when I consider my impressions of this period of time where, as musicians, we have been stripped of the ability to get together, to play for our audiences live, I actually have a huge amount of positive takeaways from this period of time, and in particular one that is key to the Boundless Creativity campaign: to communicate with, to allow participation of and appreciation of music and the arts regardless of boundaries. This pandemic has actually forced out of us a new relationship to digital. So speaking about the challenges faced by the culture sector during recovery, and also what opportunities they present, I think any level of hardship and a stripping of ease or of privilege, of course, makes us all value everything around us with an intensity that we couldn't manufacture before.
Well, thanks very much to Nicola. And I'm delighted that we also have with us today the new CEO of UK Research and Innovation, Professor Ottilie Laser, who's made the time in her first fortnight in office to talk to us about why boundless creativity is important not only from the perspective of the Arts and Humanities Research Council, but from UK innovation more broadly. Welcome, Ottilie.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to join this roundtable, at least briefly at the start, and to say something about creativity. So UKRI is a research and innovation organisation, obviously, and creativity is therefore absolutely core to everything that we do. And I think that the birth of UKRI 2 years ago, as a result of Paul Nurse's vision to bring together all the disciplines into a single organisation, absolutely captures the value and the synergies that we can create through cross-disciplinary creativity, bringing together all that expertise to look at questions in a different way. And I think that's been brilliantly illustrated by the way that UKRI has been able to respond to the pandemic, a whole new set of challenges and problems to address. And the fact that we've all been together under one virtual roof, at least, has allowed us to bring all kinds of different perspectives together to bear on this problem. And a lot of the issues flagged by COVID have been issues, as Andrew said, about our lives and our cultures. And the arts and humanities and research in those disciplines have been absolutely crucial in allowing us to address those disciplines. And the AHRC has mobilized in an incredibly impressive way to tackle those issues really quickly and in collaboration with particularly the technology industry. And I think that that collaboration is absolutely epitomizes the power of UKRI, but also the way that COVID has both created challenges and difficulties, but also catalyzed solutions and opportunities going forward. So the possibility through the Boundless Creativity project to make access to these really important cultural and cohesive experiences that bring us all together, to make that in some sense way more inclusive, whilst at the same time working productively in a situation where we're all kept apart. I think it's been just a visionary and impressive approach. And I think it is a touchstone really for how we should think about the issues going forward. It was very exciting last week with the publication of the government's research and development roadmap to see that kind of thinking reflected more broadly. How can we learn the lessons from the pandemic and capture the benefits of the kinds of responses we've been able to mobilize to build back better and to create a truly inclusive knowledge economy? And I think the creative industries have a crucial role to play in that ambition through their extraordinary ability to generate prosperity through improving productivity, and their ability to address key issues in the context of our health and well-being, and to build a more sustainable future. And the UK is very much a world leader in creative content, and these partnerships between the arts and humanities research and the industry more generally, but the technology industry in particular, as highlighted very eloquently in Peter Bazalget's 2017 review of the creative industry, really highlighted the opportunities that we have. And those have been very much at the heart of the Creative Industries Clusters programme, which is led by the AHRC at UKRI and funded through the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, a UKRI fund that precisely allows us to capture these extraordinary cross-disciplinary opportunities to build this inclusive knowledge economy that will help address some of the inequalities that we see across the UK. So the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund that has allowed us to fund the Creative Industry Clusters programme not only convenes world-class researchers and businesses, but it spans right across the UK, across the regions, and reflects this mission very much the levelling up agenda of the government to try to use R&D as a way to fuel innovative businesses right across the UK and build this more inclusive economy. And it's very exciting, as Andrew mentioned, that AHRC and DCMS will collaborate to inform thinking about how we learn all of these wonderful lessons that have emerged from the crisis, and use that to inform how the UK cultural institutions and creative businesses can come out of lockdown and as strong as possible. So I think today is a great opportunity to reflect on all of these issues and to think about how we can retain the good things, reset after this major shock to the system, and reimagine how we can use all these extraordinary newfound ways of working to build back better. And above all, it's really clear that around the world we will desperately need the extraordinary, positive and engaging input of the arts and humanities and research into the arts and humanities as a mainstay of our creative and innovative culture to sustain us through this difficulty to build a brighter and better future. So I really hope that you enjoy today's events in that spirit. And I'd like to thank Andrew again very much for the opportunity to be able to participate at the beginning of this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Ottiline, and thank you for those opening remarks. I mean, it was helpful to be reminded of the importance of our cultural and creative industries to a knowledge economy, but also of the potential of digital technology to promote diversity and inclusion and to contribute to the work of addressing the social inequalities that I think the pandemic has exposed. And part of resetting to recover will be ensuring that those inequalities are not entrenched by what we've been experiencing over recent months. Now it's my great pleasure to turn to our Science Minister, Amanda Solloway, and to welcome her. Amanda was with us previously for the launch of Boundless Creativity. She then spoke very poignantly of the importance of our cultural lives during lockdown, both in reference to our well-being, but our personal mental health. Great, Amanda, that you can be with us again. I know this link between culture and mental health is something that you're interested in, and we've turned to culture for education and entertainment during lockdown. But I think it's fair to say we've turned to it for comfort and consolation as well. And I wonder, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts about, you know, based on our experiences during lockdown, about the relationship between cultural consumption and sort of learning to live with some of the anxiety, loneliness, isolation that lockdown has imposed.
Thank you very much. Gosh, broad subject. How long have I got? It said 10 minutes. I could do with 10 hours on this subject. And Andrew, thank you. An absolute pleasure to be here as always. I was just reflecting actually on your question, and I guess as you know, I always try and sort of relate things personally on these kind of questions. And one of the things, my dad lives in Wales, and I haven't been to see him, and they've obviously had a 5-mile limit in terms of where they're driving, although obviously that's been released this week. But also my auntie just lives up the road and has went into self-isolation. And I have to say, you know, that the reason why she's managed to get through this, and the reason why my dad has got through this, is all the things that you're talking about, actually. And I think we need to actually acknowledge how all these cultural things that you're talking about impact positively on people's lives. And one of the great things that we can do is, you know, you'll see phrases, we'll see there's lots of things culturally on offer, and all of them have a positive impact on how we not only just get through this, but how we come out the other side as well. So yeah, absolutely significant.
I mean, I know, Amanda, that you're also a firm believer in sort of bringing our cultural and creative industries, you know, into the bigger story about how the government can work to promote sort of economic growth and productivity, and to do that in a way that sort of touches all of the regions and, you know, sort of geographical reach. why do you think it's so important that the cultural and creative industries are fully integrated in government's wider thinking about sort of industrial strategy and sort of, rebooting the economy?
Well, it seems impossible that it shouldn't be, in actual fact. I don't even think we should really be asking that question, or have to, because it seems very logical to me that if we're going to come out of economically equipped, socially, mentally, all of this, then we have to level up throughout the whole of the country. And you'll have seen, we've got a place strategy coming through. But it does, it is so important, isn't it, that we embrace different cultures, that we embrace different. It's weird to think that I live in Derby. I'm not different, I don't think, to people who live in the south. But often we must make sure that we do embrace all cultures throughout the whole of the country. So no, absolutely, really, really important.
Yes, well, as you know, I live in Nottingham, and
yes, where's that football?
This is probably a conversation we shouldn't get into, but I think people in Nottingham think they're quite different to the people in Derby and vice versa. But if you stay with us, Amanda, we're going to bring in Neil Mendoza, and it's my great pleasure to welcome my Oxford colleague and the DCMS Commissioner for Cultural Recovery and Renewal. Amongst many other things, Neil is the author of a very fine independent review of museums of England that was published in 2017. It's really appropriate, Neil, that you're with us today in your new role, and congratulations on that. I just wanted to start off by asking you how you think this joint research review that I've just announced will help us understand what's been happening to our sort of cultural life and creative sort of industries during the pandemic, and how is it going to help you as the Cultural Commissioner think through what's required for cultural recovery, renewal and growth?
Got it. Okay. Listen, Andrew, first of all, I think it's quite a bit of background noise coming from somebody. It might be Amanda, I'm not sure. I'm thrilled to be part of this partnership project, really, between DCMS and AHRC, and I really hope it will add a major contribution to DCMS's work and deepen government's understanding of the sector. But before I start, I really want to mention again the cultural package that we launched this week that you brought up in the beginning. You've seen that it's a giant £1.57 billion recovery package for the culture and heritage sector. And it's a plan that we've been working on at DCMS for months, working very closely with colleagues and officials in Downing Street and the Treasury. And in a way, I'm not sure that we've all grasped just what a major moment this is for culture, because the scale of this intervention is unprecedented in the UK and actually internationally, whatever the other numbers being bandied around are. And it really represents a huge endorsement by the government of the cultural sector. And they've recognised it, not just for the intrinsic worth of culture for its own sake, which we all understand, but as others have mentioned, but for the important part it plays in our economic and community life. And I think it's a really big deal, actually. And this fund will enable us to protect cultural assets of regional, national, international importance, and including, crucially, the levelling up agenda that's already been mentioned a couple of times. But even with the government support on this scale, the sector is going to need to learn to survive, particularly as we come out of the pandemic, probably with new business models, new ways of working, and of course, new ways of connecting to audiences. So it's really my hope that this project will help us learn more about how the cultural sector has interacted with digital technologies during the pandemic, and give us a blueprint for how they could embrace digital skills and technologies more widely as part of their restart.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you say, this intervention will go down as an important chapter in the history of the cultural and creative industries, and it's a very significant and much needed lifeline. But I think, as both you and the Secretary of State have already made clear, while it's a necessary intervention, Neil, it's perhaps not a sufficient one. And I just wondered, in your role, I mean, just thinking about the whole issue of sort of live and lockdown, and how we get people back into venues, what sort of things do you think that you would like to know that we don't know enough of at the moment through this research review? What's the knowledge that we don't have that, if we had it, it would really help you in your role in advising government about sort of the the so-called resetting to recover of the sector?
Well, I think we need to know as much about the experiences of cultural organisations, both in the UK and actually around the world. An enormous amount has happened. We've seen here, fantastic work by the National Theatre on YouTube. I thought the Old Vic's staging of Lungs was brilliant because it wasn't only just it was cleverly thought through as a stream, but also the way that they priced it and broadcast it was really clever. There are wonderful commercial aggregators of cultural content, virtual tours of museums, robot tours. So we need to learn from this lockdown experience what works and what hasn't worked, which experiences are satisfying and which aren't, and then also which cultural projects can be monetized commercially. I mean, that's going to be quite important. We know that you can put stuff up for free, but it doesn't necessarily help. And the point is that now it is so urgent because the cultural sector is going through such a difficult period. And you're right. This giant fund won't be able to save or rescue everyone. It just won't. And moreover, we're really concerned about when performing arts can actually restart. When's that going to happen? So we've got a great practical urgency to learn what we can, whether it's, I can go on and on, distanced opera in Spain or theatre in South Korea. And I'm hoping that we can use this project to gather data, bring together research from the medical arena, from behavioral science, from digital work to work out how to ensure we can have a strong recovery in the sector.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's very powerful actually to see both of you on the screen, because actually, to have our science minister, representing our sort of knowledge economy and our cultural commissioner thinking about, a key part of that knowledge economy, I think speaks to the joined upness of government here. We probably have only got time now for one or two questions, but I'm wondering whether any questions have come in for me to. There's one from Craig Simpson, who's the arts correspondent at the Telegraph. Maybe we take this one. Is how the research project's going to work, and can you expand on and advise the measures that may be required to restore public confidence to cultural participation? Let me just give you a couple, and then I'll give each of you the floor once. How do we get audiences back? What might these new business models look like that get people beyond the idea that online is free? There's a lot there. Let me just give you each an opportunity to say one final thing, and then we'll move on. So, Amanda, could we come back to you first?
Yes, there's a lot there, Andrew, and like ever, I always want more time, and apologies that I can't stay longer as well. Lots of things. Ottiline mentioned the roadmap, and that's one of the key things really, is that we're really focused not just on what it is we need to do, but actually doing what it is that we need to do. And I think that is the biggest message that I can say to anybody, is it has to be all about action. And you're right, we need to get people going back into these places, convinced that they can go safely. And there are lots of lessons learned. I think I agree with you, but just before I quietly disappear, it is incredible when you think that the three of us are on this screen together, we're talking about this, we're having a debate about this. And I think there will be lessons learned in terms of productivity, as you mentioned. But for me, the single biggest thing is we need to do this considered, but we need to make sure that we do it with a lot of action and thought, because we do absolutely have to get the economy moving, but particularly, as you would expect me to say, the creative arts as well.
Thank you, Amanda. And Neil, back to you for one final comment.
Yeah, the only thing, I've just monetized something myself. I'm going to do an ad. I've just signed up for Marquee TV, which is a sort of a Netflix style aggregator of cultural content. And I think that's, that's a clever way of potentially monetizing and helping the sector. We'll see if it works. It looks pretty impressive from where I sit.
Well, thanks to both of you, and thanks for putting some more wind in the sail of Boundless Creativity. It's been great to have you both with us. Yeah, thanks again. So I'm going to move now to introduce our next video. This is very exciting. It's from one of the world's leading museum directors. I'm a very big fan of his. He's a powerful voice on the subject of the intersections between creativity, culture and diversity. Let's hear from Secretary Lonnie Bunch.
Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. It's my honor to take part in this Boundless Creativity event with the Arts and Humanities Research Council. The Smithsonian has had a productive relationship with AHRC as we've hosted some of your postdocs as Smithsonian Fellows since 2013. I think it's been a tremendous benefit for us both. Let me begin by saying that I know this is a difficult time for all of us. The dual pandemic of racism and deadly disease has taken a toll on our physical, emotional, and economic well-being. But now, as the world tries to navigate these challenges, I would argue that organizations promoting the arts and humanities should take the lead. We can address the health crisis by equipping the public with knowledge, explaining the science, and disseminating best practices to keep our audiences and employees healthy. And we can address the crisis of racism by fighting fear and blame with hope, encouragement, education, and inspiration. In times of profound societal upheaval like we're undergoing in our respective nations, organizations like ours and those you support in the UK are vital. We help citizens remember our most deeply held values, and we use collections, exhibits, and programs to remind us of our common humanity. This moment presents an opportunity to think creatively and to find new modes of engagement. That means enhancing our ability to provide digital offerings to ensure that we're reaching people wherever they are. That means working more collectively across disciplines to find new avenues of research. That means boldly addressing topics that are nuanced, difficult, and contentious. Embracing the inclusion and representation is crucial. The past few weeks have also reinforced the needs of all of our institutions, especially cultural ones, to commit themselves to being representative and inclusive. Too often, history's been told from a white male perspective. That must change. We need to meet the challenge of the moment and live up to the promise of justice by telling the unvarnished truth and confronting our past. One way the Smithsonian is doing that with the museum that I built, this new digital platform talking about race, generating conversations about race with digital tools, instructional videos, and multimedia tasks. I believe that it's important for us now, if these protests are going to justify, we want to help the world understand what we're going through. But first, we need to set an example. That means not only telling more diverse stories, but making a giant leap forward in the diversity of our researchers, our collections, our staff, and our boardrooms. It will mean better outcomes in the quality of what we do, and it will show other sectors the value of being truly invested in diversity, inclusion, equity, and accessibility. I believe in the power of the arts and the humanities. In times of great sorrow, I have always looked to the beauty and meaning of culture to ground me, to offer me hope and solace. Although we're going through massive challenges, I believe cultural institutions can lead the way in finding solutions and making this moment truly transformative. I am confident we will do so. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for that rallying cry there about seeing history from diverse perspectives and his powerful idea of a dual pandemic. It's my great pleasure now to introduce two more videos from our cultural ambassadors for Boundless Creativity. So we're going to hear first from the Chinese actress Lu Zhang, and then from the poet and broadcaster Lem Sisay.
Recently, we learned about the new initiative Boundless Creativity in the UK, and I think it is particularly important at this moment to have international cooperation on this topic. And if we can overcome the barriers that prevent people from enjoying different arts and culture through technology, this may bring new opportunities for us to understand the relationship between theater and the audience, and find out how arts and culture can improve people's mental health and well-being in special occasions.
The cultural sector has always faced challenges, and I think the largest challenge that we face, how do we show the value of what we do to the wider community? We have now got a much bigger publisher, and it is the internet, than has ever happened before, than any press could ever deliver, which means that our rules as to what is good art and what is not are going to change more over the next 50 years than they ever have done before. Boundless creativity means that you can unlock all of the traps which people find inside their own mind and spirit. Boundless creativity means that creativity is not the monopoly of artists.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Edward Harcourt. I'm the Director of Research at AHRC. And of course, research lies at the heart of Boundless Creativity. You're now going to see 4 short clips from people working on research projects AHRC is currently funding on pressing issues presented by COVID-19, from digital innovation and the accessibility of arts and culture, to the role of arts and culture in the resilience, mental health, and well-being of the nation. Though these are just a small snapshot of what we're doing, I hope they convey to you some of its breadth and significance. Roll the clips, please.
I'm Professor Andrew Chitty, and I lead the Creative Industries Clusters Programme and the Audience of the Future Challenge for UK Research and Innovation. Now, they are both multi-stranded, big efforts to push forward the boundaries of applied research and development in the creative industries, to create value for creative businesses through research. Audience of the Future is particularly concerned with immersive technologies and how they're applied in the future. Creative Industries Clusters has a broader focus and includes big university partnerships. So one of the things we're looking at in our Audience of the Future programme is what are the experiences that we can build future audiences for. So say in the museums and galleries sector, how can we build audiences that aren't reliant on coming to the museum? Now, a year ago, that was obviously of interest to the sector, intellectually and commercially, but now it's a kind of life and death proposition, because even though museums and galleries may be opening again now, the visitors they'll attract will both be smaller in number for a long period of time, but also whole segments will be missing.
Hi, I'm Eliza. I'm Head of Policy at the Creative Industries Policy and Evidence Centre, or the PEC. And in the wake of COVID-19, some of our newest research has been in partnership with the Intellectual Property Office and AudienceNet, and has focused on understanding the impact of the pandemic on the demand for TV, film, games, music, and more. To do this, we surveyed a representative sample of over 1,000 of the same people every week for 6 weeks to get a real-time picture of how much the pandemic has changed our habits of cultural consumption.
Hey, my name's Lorna Probert. I work at Aardman Animations as an exec producer on a project called What's Up with Alex, working with researchers at the universities of Nottingham, Loughborough and the LSE. Our research seeks to advance mental health literacy and provide early intervention for students aged 17 to 21 through a series of animated films and an online resource tackling topics around isolation, competitive society, social media, independence and perfectionism, co-created with young people. At the heart of our research is the concept of co-creation. We're carrying out workshops, now all online, with a diverse mix of students to understand the key mental health challenges they face and seek their insight into how best support young people in recognising and addressing these issues.
My name's Helen Chatterjee. I'm a Professor of Biology at University College London, and the AHRC COVID grant that we're working on is looking at community and creative responses to the COVID lockdown and beyond. We're looking at the creative responses, so how people have been engaging creatively throughout lockdown, and how the issue of being isolated throughout the pandemic, but all for other reasons, for physical or mental health reasons, means that people can't engage in the normal way that they would creatively, whether that's going to their local museum or library or reading group or visiting their local park, how they can engage creatively both online and offline.
So the problem that culture, I think, experiences at the moment, in this moment, this post-COVID moment, is it's built around institutions and institutional ways of delivering things that currently don't function. They're not functioning. That doesn't mean they've lost their purpose. It just means that the venue or building-based idea of how we assemble, create and distribute culture does not work at the time. So that makes it really important to think about what are those distribution means that are required at the moment, and how do we provide access. We have to rethink that to ensure that we don't create new barriers to access in the process. So we don't want to replicate any barriers to access from historical methods of delivering and distributing culture in these new methods. And that's why fundamentally a lot of the projects that we're doing in research, which are looking to adopt and pull through innovation in digital technologies, are absolutely vital at the moment. In fact, they've never been more vital because the whole system is disrupted. And we've got to find our way to the future as well as restore the amazing kind of cultural institutions.
Well, that wraps up the first part of this event. We're now moving on to our virtual roundtable. And this is going to be chaired by the distinguished science journalist and board member of UK Research and Innovation, Vivienne Parry. So, Viv, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Very good to be with you all. And you've heard from Amanda Solloway of the importance of recovery and reset and the critical role that arts and culture plays in that reset and recovery. And underneath that, of course, is the role of research. We've got a panel here with me today virtually, of course, to talk over some of the key elements of this. So can I introduce to you Peter Florence, director of the Hay Festival, Jan Dalley, arts editor of the FT, David Olusoga, historian and TV presenter, and welcome back Edward Harcourt, Director of Research Strategy and Innovation at the AHRC. I want to start with you, Peter, because you've actually had to do this incredible pivot. Hay Festival takes place at the end of May, and you found yourself in March with a incredibly short time to completely turn around what you did. How did it work, and what was your experience?
I think the adrenaline helped, actually. The do or die issue around creativity really fired up both the delivery team and also all the artists and the audiences who took part. It came at maximum exposure for us. We had bought all the stuff, we'd paid all the contractors, and we were about to launch the program when the festival had to be cancelled in March. And what we found was that there are amazing opportunities in completely rethinking a format. The essence of festivals is commonality, the common experience, and how you recreate that digitally is very surprising. Much of it is about the platform, being able to not only simply watch television and tweet, but having the audience participation and engagement live in the same platform. So that was a key part of it. The other great advantage is that you are no longer restricted to an audience who can fork out the money to, find the time to, and be geographically able to come all the way to mid Wales, find somewhere to stay, find stuff to eat. So anecdotally, we know that the diversity of our audience multiplied many, many times. But also in demographics, we found that this was a combination of a very intimate experience, people talking directly to a laptop in somebody's home, but also an extraordinary global experience. And there's a map that I think we've got, which shows the spread of people who were taking part in our AHRC-funded Wordsworth project. Now, some of this, and if you could show it on screen, it would be wonderful. Some of this is down to Helen McCrory and Benedict Cumberbatch's pulling power. But if you look at that spread, that's not only across pretty much all the time zones on Earth, but there were people watching this program from 140 countries and taking part in it. This radically changes how you begin to understand what it is that you're producing.
And it gives fantastic value to the accident of the English language as a global tool. But also it accepts the idea that everything you do has to be pitched for everyone, not simply for any kind of niche audience.
Did you make it pay?
We were extraordinarily lucky in that the two systems we had for earning, nobody except the mixed martial arts industry seems to make online events pay in ticket price. But what we did have was a fantastic donation program and some very generous and inspired sponsorship from both the Welsh Government and Baillie Gifford, who have been traditional sponsors of the real live event, but also pivoted to digital, found the massively increased audiences very exciting. And just as the artists found creating work, whether it was painting or ballet or music, for this kind of deliberate face-to-face experience, everybody responded, I think, with boundless creativity.
And actually, I read that BTS, which is the biggest K-pop rock band in the world, a pop band in the world, in case you're not familiar with them, they launched their new album, Bang Bang Con, online, and they managed to gross $18 million and reach 750,000 people, which is the equivalent of 50 stadium shows. So certainly they're able to make the digital pay. But Jan, this is a problem really that we're going to have to think of new business models, because some art forms are simply not set up to go digital in quite the same way.
Yes, absolutely. And it is a huge challenge. I can't pretend to have much in the way of answers, because I think that everybody is still learning about this. Several of our speakers this morning have talked about the importance of learning, and I think we are all learning. And there are many, many bad things about this situation, but there are some very fascinating things about it. And one of them is the opportunity to study and indeed research the way in which audiences and performers actually do interact, which is probably a more complicated thing than we realized. So we're learning, performers are certainly learning, audiences are also learning about perhaps different ways of that they want to consume and participate. Peter's talked very eloquently about the advantages of having an online audience, which is very much more diverse, much more accessible, or gives much greater accessibility. And I think we all need to learn very, very quickly from these changing habits. Whether there will ever be a form, a change in artistic form and a change in business model that will fully satisfy the special magic that comes from being there when somebody does something, when somebody sings, when somebody acts, when somebody makes theatre. It's very difficult to say whether that will ever really happen. But I imagine that the business models of the future will be something of a mixture, that we will have some version of live plus digital, which will corral the best of both worlds.
David Olusoga, I imagine that you will have been in enormous difficulty with your making films, because you have a production company, and getting traveling has become impossible. And we've had this huge increase in demand, but of course the supply has dwindled because people just haven't been able to get out and film. But does this excite you, that actually you'll be able to get potentially to a much wider audience digitally?
Well, I think like everybody, I've been on a journey that began in March with despair and belief that this was a fatal change, an event that many organizations wouldn't recover from. And I wouldn't want to minimize the issues, but there has been a quite incredible burst of creativity in all sorts of industries, and a realization that technology that pre-existed, that was there Zoom was there long before the pandemic, that these technologies have capacities that we didn't understand, and that audiences have appetites that we didn't understand. I think it's very difficult to imagine what the future is going to hold. It's very difficult to make predictions at this moment. But I think one thing we can safely say is that no one's going to go back to a world in which there are not these digital options. There are not these virtual versions of, whether it's literary festivals, whether it's public talks, whether it's theatre. I think it's very often the case that technology's arrival, its emergence as a new technology, is not what brings it into our lives. It's the marrying of that emergence with an event, with some phenomena that changes our lives. And this moment of potential, the fact that this year will mark a change in how we consume culture, how we interact with it, that was not something that was immediately obvious in March when we were all feeling extremely frightened at that moment. So it has been an incredible journey. Television is on a journey of trying to make television within these new, difficult and constrained times. And again, what you see is incredible creativity. You also see the new involvement of people who weren't getting to make programs. We are having to rely on local crews in local countries. That's having a really interesting effect on widening participation in the making of television.
Talk about widening participation in the making of television, which is very important, but there is also a digital divide in terms of who can access high quality digital content. Our broadband isn't sufficient, and in many households it's very difficult to have a private space or to have any interaction that's not wrecked by your brother doing his gaming down in his bedroom. So do you think there will be a digital divide here?
I think inevitably there will, and I think it's something we have to take on and confront. I think in terms of the access to broadband, that's something which I think Britain has got to take very seriously, and I think we're very much behind the curve on this. But I think in the ways that we live, the way our houses are operated, I think we're at the beginning of a radical restructuring. If traveling is reduced, and I think it's going to be reduced not just because of the pandemic, but because the pandemic has revealed to us the advantages of making our lives less geographically atomized. I think that's going to change our relationship with our houses. It's going to change our relationship with where in cities we live, our relationship with cities and with transport. And again, as well as there being a divide, there's incredible opportunities. The idea that if the production of art does no longer need to be a purely urban phenomena, that places that have been considered to be cultural deserts, places where productions of television and other art forms hasn't taken place, are suddenly viable, suddenly become places that it's easy to move through. It's going to be very interesting to see how television makes real its desire to reduce the dominance of London. How we measure that is going to be different if companies don't have offices anymore, but also how we inspire that, how we energize that. If being in Soho is no longer a prerequisite for making television, then I think the gloves are off and the potential is enormous.
And Edward, that really shows the possibilities for arts and culture really being the linchpin of recovery, particularly in those areas that have been most blighted in the past. And how does research play a part in making sure that recovery happens?
Well, I think one way of thinking about the present moment is that UK society, and indeed the whole world, is in the middle of a gigantic live experiment about what it means for culture to go digital. So I think in 2018, DCMS published a document called Culture is Digital. That was rather an optimistic, forward-looking title at the time, but if it wasn't digital at the end of 2018, it's a lot more digital now, thanks to the incredibly agile adaptations, some of which we've just heard about, that have taken place just over the last 3 or 4 months. But we're still just beginning to take the measure of what it means for culture to go digital. And of course, that is a research question. And when I use the word live experiment, I don't use it lightly. We're gathering, you heard from Eliza Easton at Nesta in the earlier presentations, how we're gathering real-time data on changes in patterns of cultural consumption. We're also gathering real-time data on the ways in which access to culture buffers against the mental health ill effects of social isolation. So, but inevitably, because we're still in the middle of it, there's a great deal that we don't know. So this research remains ongoing. The other thing that is very important, I think, about the role of research in relation to the question you posed is where the research happens. Because notwithstanding the point that David made, and I think it's a super important point, that if we're all online, you could be online, doesn't really matter where you're online. Universities have which is where a great deal of AHRC funded research takes place. And that of it that doesn't take place in universities takes place in big institutions which have large buildings and, as it were, inescapable physical location. Universities have a very important role to play in the national economy as anchor institutions. So there's research that shows that of the two kinds of place which it's most important for you to have in a city if your economy is to flourish, university is one and a large hospital is the other. So I think there are limits to the extent to which the place of research can become any old where, a place of your choosing, wherever your laptop or iPhone happens to be. And I think that's the interaction between the liberation from place and the inevitable location of these large research institutions is another of the very interesting research questions that we need to look at as we think about the role of arts and culture in regeneration.
Jan, we were talking about how this whole process is democratizing access to the arts, no longer the preserve of the middle class and affluent alone. But how will performances and the arts have to change with a global audience? And how will artists themselves have to change? I mean, doesn't filmed theatre become cinema?
Well, it's quite interesting. I have talked to quite a number of performers over this time about how they've had to change their techniques and manage their techniques when they are switching, they're doing, they're making the digital switch and they are performing in a medium that they hadn't necessarily originally envisaged or they're not so experienced in. I'm not certain that we should really think, though, about having to make huge adjustments for a global audience, because I think culture still has its power from its base. We have to be very careful about globalizing culture, I think, because it can very easily become rather bland and rather kind of, we must please everybody. Even though we can all listen to things and watch things and experience things from all around the world, I still think that creative people work best if they work from their base point, from the ground from which they grow, and that makes the most interesting experience. And that is why we want to watch things from around the world, because they are different, not because they are homogenized. I think most creators think like that. Whether the performers have to be hugely adaptable, and in this situation they are proving hugely adaptable. I think that all kinds of things have happened. I mean, at the moment, at the FT, we're in the middle of commissioning an online play, which is going to be broadcast as part of our online festival in September. And already I'm reading what's coming in, and it's absolutely fascinating. I mean, the sheer range of creativity that this emergency, this pandemic has unleashed is very, very interesting. Not all of it works, but the best of it is going to be durable, I think. It's going to be something that reaches beyond this moment.
Well, I think historians like David and indeed Andrew Thompson will look back at this period as having been a period of boundless creativity. And I may be a lowly scientist, but actually I have enormous optimism about the future for arts and culture, because they are absolutely critical and essential to our recovery from COVID-19. And on that, can I turn back to Andrew Thompson?
Thank you, Vivienne. I think we were going to allow just a few minutes to take questions, so I will keep my eye on the chat box. We have a question about the wider impact to society of reduced and changed access to the arts and culture during lockdown. We have another question about how we ensure the learnings from all of this are really taken on board and harnessed for the future. I had a question that I'll add to that, if I may, is that you've all spoken quite eloquently, I think, about the trying to understand in real time what happens to culture, you know, as it moves online sort of during the lockdown, and some experiences being perhaps more satisfying than sort of other experiences. I think Maria Bolshaw, when she was last with us, spoke from the perspective of the Tate and a massive expansion of online offerings of culture, but alongside that, a big challenge of digital curation. You don't just throw this stuff online, but how do you make it attractive, accessible, interesting, engaging? Peter, I think you've touched upon that in the question of the sort of the Hay Festival in relation to the Hay. So what I'm going to do is, I think, just give you all quickly the sort of last opportunity to have a word. So Peter, can we start with you?
I would say fundamentally the key thing is to allow the artists themselves time and resources to experiment with the platforms. People will work with the space they have, and they'll understand the opportunities and limitations of the space. And I would just reiterate again, intimacy and global reach coming together is the unique opportunity here. It's quite right that specificity is key. I mean, Macondo and Middlemarch are incredibly particular, but absolutely universal places in literary terms. Writers, artists, even ballet dancers, Fernando Montaño, who created a dance for us, especially from his own bathroom, was using the limitations of the space to create something utterly wonderful. So trust the artist and then trust the audience.
Thank you very much. I mean, a very globalized, but also a very localized world, and that culture expressing that dual truth. Jan, a final thought from you?
Well, I'd like to underline what Peter's very well said, that support for the artists at this moment is really, really important. I mean, I know that government has announced it's what seems like an extremely generous package, bailout package. I would say that that's only interim money. I think that an awful lot more is going to have to be done in the sectors that actually can't reopen and can't do certain things. It would be a shame if all the money went on propping up buildings when actually people are what make creativity particularly boundless. And I think that I would really like to put in a plea for more focused support for those who live their lives as freelancers. Many of them have fallen right outside the net of almost all the government schemes, and they are, as Peter rightly says, they're the people who are going to make this all happen. They're the people who are going to bring us out of this, and of course the recovery and the resetting and the renewal to happen in a really exciting way.
Thank you, Jan. I mean, so much of that cultural labour force or workforce made up by freelancers, independent small television companies, creative digital SMEs that are our audience of the future, you know, hidden from sight, you know, for many, but actually the survival of our cultural life, highly contingent upon all of that. David, a final thought from you?
I'd like to first reiterate what Jan says. And looking at television, one of the things we have to avoid is that those freelancers who have suffered most, who have fallen between the cracks, they've been young people. And they've also, there is an enormous challenge that when we get to the other side of this, that we remember what they have been through and that we think about career development, we think about recovery for them rather than just the industry. But I think trying to cling on to that fact that we will get to the other side of this and trying to think about positive outcomes. I can't imagine personally returning to the relationship with the arts I had before this. I've seen things, I've engaged with things through virtual platforms that I wouldn't have done otherwise. And most people I know have had the same experience. Thousands of people have watched programs that they wouldn't have watched. Millions of people have engaged with television that they wouldn't otherwise have watched. New audiences have been found. I don't think anybody's willing to turn their back on the new discoveries they've made. There is an opportunity to seize those new audiences, and I think everybody will have a post-COVID cultural life that is both engaged and live and about the event and about interaction, and that's virtual. There are amazing opportunities for us to sort of have a wider range of cultural interactions because of this great experiment that we're living through now.
Thank you. So no return to the status quo ante, but don't forget the demographic sides of this, because we knew before the crisis that employment at the intersection of the creative and digital was growing 3 times as fast as in other parts of the economy. Will that continue to be the case afterwards? We will see. And then quickly from Edward, and then I'll come to Vivienne for the final word.
I think I'll just close by responding to one of the questions that was posed, which is how do we ensure that the learnings from this are taken on board and form the basis of a thriving cultural sector in the future? Well, this is AHRC's special subject. We've made it absolutely the cornerstone of our approach to COVID-19, and indeed of a great deal of other things that we do, that the impact of the research in real time should be absolutely to the fore. So through the very close collaboration that we have with DCMS, through the Joint Research Review and other channels that was announced this afternoon, through our close relationship with the country's big museums, archives, libraries and galleries, and indeed with many of the smaller ones, and through our collaboration with the Arts Council, it's through those relationships that we will ensure that whatever we discover from this living experiment that we're in the middle of gets taken on board and made something of.
Thank you. And Vivienne, a final word from you, please.
Oh, just briefly to say that, you know, all the people that in the arts that I've met both say that this is the most terrible thing that's happened to them, but it's the best thing that's happened to them. And they are so energized and fizzing with creativity. And I think that that's a very, very good sign for the future.
Well, that's a nice positive note to end on, and thank you to all of our panel members. In closing, I'm very pleased to say that we have not one new announcement for you today, but we've actually got 2 new announcements. And because we're also launching a new digital museum. This is a first for the Arts and Humanities Research Council. It's a museum of boundless creativity, of course. It's about celebrating our cultural creative industries and our culture and creativity more broadly. But we need the public's help. We need the public's help to nominate the idea or object or person from the first 20 years of this century, the 21st century, that they would like to see in this new online collection. To inspire new nominations, we've asked people, including 2 former cultural secretaries who are passionate about the creative and cultural industries, what they would like to nominate. And for the next month, people can submit their suggestions via our website, www.ahrc.ukri.org, or the hashtag Boundless Creativity, and share them via social media. And a panel of curatorial experts is going to select 20 objects for the Museum of Boundless Creativity, and that museum will open its virtual doors in September. So let me just close by saying that's bringing us to the end of our proceedings today. I want to thank everybody who's joined us over the last hour. You can visit the website of the Arts and Humanities Research Council to learn more about what we do. You'll find various ways of engaging with us through Boundless Creativity, through our annual Research in Film Awards, look out for those next November, and through the many other ways that we seek to promote wider public engagement with the research that we fund. So thank you on behalf of the Arts and Humanities Research Council for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you with us. Goodbye, everyone.
Our humanity depends on our ability to have hope. It depends on our ability to tell clear and inspirational stories that present a vision that we feel we can step into. But also, our humanity depends on our ability to understand the truth of what we've been through. a truth of our history, not just telling stories that suit us, but ones perhaps that don't suit us at all, ones that are perhaps painful to hear, but that are stories of integrity and help us be a better version of ourselves. And I believe that there is no more holistic and all-encompassing and complex yet truthful way to do that than through the world of arts and culture.